Okay, picture this. You're watching a massive football match. It's the final few minutes. One team is throwing everything they've got at the goal, but the other team, well, they've got every single player crammed into their own penalty box. It's a human wall. The whistle blows, the game's over, and a manager, absolutely furious, storms into the post-match interview, ready to drop a line that people will be repeating for years to come. And that furious manager was Liverpool's Brendan Rodgers back in 2014 after a heartbreaking loss to Chelsea. His complaint? That Chelsea didn't just park one bus, they parked two. He just perfectly captured that feeling, that sheer frustration of playing against one of modern football's most notorious tactics. And that phrase is exactly what we're digging into today, parking the bus. So what does it actually mean? Well, to park the bus is basically to play in the most defensive way imaginable. The goal isn't really to win the game, it's just to not lose. You forget about attacking, you pack everyone behind the ball, and you just try to make it physically impossible for the other team to score. It can be super effective for sure, but man, it is not pretty to watch. And one of the best things about this phrase is how it's just become this springboard for some hilarious commentary. I mean, journalists and fans have had a total field day with it. You hear about teams parking a whole multi-story car park, or my personal favorite, this wild collection of tractors, plumbers' vans, and pizza delivery mopeds. It just goes to show you how powerful and visual that original idea really is. So where did this thing actually come from? If you're talking about English football, well, the trail almost always leads back to one person, the absolute master of the media soundbite, Jose Mourinho. Right, let's rewind the clock to 2004. Mourinho has just landed at Chelsea. After this really frustrating 0-0 draw with Tottenham, he drops this now legendary quote. He slams Spurs for being too defensive, saying, and this is key, as we say in Portugal, they brought the bus and they left the bus in front of the goal. He specifically flags it as a Portuguese saying, and in that moment, he basically imports it into the English football dictionary. And case closed, right? Mourinho brings a phrase over from Portugal, it catches on, the end. Well, it seems pretty open and shut, but to be really sure, we have to put on our detective hats and dig a little deeper into the language itself. And to do that, we're not just going on gut feelings. We're going to use some really powerful tools from a field called corpus linguistics. This basically lets us search through these gigantic digital archives of text. We're talking billions of words from newspapers, websites, you name it, to see exactly when, where, and how a phrase was being used. So these are our archives. We've got the British National Corpus, which is like a snapshot of English before 1993. Then we have newspaper collections from specific years, and the big one, N1010, which has scraped about 20 billion words from the web. You put them all together, and it's like a time machine for language. So let's start our search before Mourinho's big moment and see what we can find. All right, first step in any good investigation, we need to look for clues before the main event, before that Mourinho press conference in 2004. I mean, if the phrase was already kicking around, we should be able to find it in the older records. First stop, the British National Corpus. That's 100 million words of text from before 1993. We search for park the bus in a football context, and we get a big, fat zero. Nothing. Zilch. I mean, there was one metaphorical use we found, but let's just say it had absolutely nothing to do with sports. Okay, so what about a bit later? Let's check the newspapers from 1993. What do we find? You guessed it, zero. Every single time the phrase park the bus shows up, it is literally about a bus driver parking an actual bus. So the evidence is really starting to pile up here that before Mourinho, this phrase just wasn't a thing in football. So for years, the park the bus world is completely quiet. And then, September 2004, Jose Mourinho sits down in front of a microphone. Now let's jump into the data from the moment right after that. And the changes, well, it's just incredible. Look at this. In our 2005 newspaper data, just 1 year after his comment, the phrase suddenly pops up 17 times in a football context. It goes from totally non-existent in the media to a recognized term, like overnight. That isn't slow evolution, that's an explosion. And here, right here, is the smoking gun. Of those 17 mentions in 2005, A whopping 82%. That's 14 of them either mention Mourinho by name or are clearly talking about his original comment. So this confirms it. He wasn't just using a phrase, he was the story. The media got it directly from him. What's just wild is how fast it became part of the language. So, 2004, it's brand new. By 2005, journalists are using it, but often in quotation marks, to signal that it's this new trendy term. But then, get this, by 2008, people online are already calling it a cliché. And by 2013, it's just everywhere. It went from a fresh idea to a tired old saying in less than 10 years. And that journey from a really sharp visual metaphor to a kind of standard, almost lazy bit of jargon, it's a really fascinating process. By 2013, our data shows that journey was complete. It wasn't a clever line anymore. It was just part of the furniture of football talk. And you can really see that change clearly here. Back in 2005, writers would say, as Mourinho calls it, and they'd put park the bus in quotes. Fast forward to 2013, nobody mentions Mourinho, and writers start getting all self-conscious, saying things like parking the proverbial bus. And that's always a dead giveaway that a phrase has officially become a cliché. So there we have it. The verdict is in. Mourinho brought a Portuguese phrase into English, the media went crazy for it, and it became a cliché. The end. Or so we thought. Because just as we were about to close the case file, our linguistic digging turned up one last, totally unexpected twist. Right when you think you've got the whole story figured out, the data throws you a curveball. Our search for the idea of using a bus to block something led us somewhere we never, ever expected to go, miles away from a football pitch and decades before Jose Mourinho was even born. Just take a look at this. This quote is describing a protest tactic used during the American Civil Rights Movement in Atlanta in 1958. Black ministers would get on a bus, and the driver, following orders, would literally park the bus, turn off the engine, and refuse to move, using the vehicle itself as a tool of obstruction to create a standoff. Now, let's be super clear here. This does not mean Mourinho's phrase came from the civil rights movement. There's no direct link at all. But isn't it fascinating? It's this incredible example of how the exact same powerful idea, using a giant bus as an immovable object, can pop up independently in completely different worlds. One, a fight for social justice, the other, a fight for a 0-0 draw. And all of this brings up a really interesting final point. Mourinho is a genius with words, but not everything he says turns into linguistic gold. After another one of those frustrating games, he accused a team of playing 19th century football. I mean, it's a great line, but it just never stuck. It didn't have that simple, visual, instantly understandable punch that parking the bus did. And that really leaves us with a much bigger question, one that goes way beyond football. It's about language itself. Why does one metaphor go viral and become a permanent part of our vocabulary, while another one, from the exact same person, just fades away? It's this fantastic mystery about what gives certain words and phrases their magic, their undeniable staying power.